If I erased every memory that you have, would you still be you? Or is it just a biological machine waiting for new instructions? In my opinion, it is the oldest question in the book. What is the thing we call the self? What is consciousness? I mean, it feels simple. I am me because I remember being me yesterday, I think, right? My consciousness is just memories. My skills, the stuff I learned. It's gotta be just data. I mean, if you take a computer and you wipe the hard drive, it's a new computer. It seems logical that the brain works, in my opinion, the same way. But the universe, it loves to throw me and you and everyone else curveballs. Because when you start poking at this idea, I found out it starts to fall apart pretty fast. And what you find underneath is much weirder, much more complicated, and frankly, a lot more fun. So today, we're going to take apart the machinery of the mind. We're going to look at the blueprints, shake the wires, and try to figure out what makes the lights turn on. And then my wife is going to take this video and use it as a guide on how to deal with me on a day-to-day basis. Hi, I'm Steve. I'm the ARQIV, the guy that's a tech and science enthusiast doing the research so you don't have to. And let's start with the most obvious answer. You are your memories. Because this idea, in my opinion, feels right. And there are philosophers that agreed with me, even though they have been gone a long time, like 200 years, but whatever, I'll take the win. This idea feels right. And philosophers like John Locke actually argued centuries ago that your identity is the story you tell yourself. Thanks, John Locke. I've always appreciated you, especially in the Lost story. If you know, you know. But think about it. If you are the same person you were when you were 5, and I hope not, but if you've changed, your cells have regenerated, your opinions hopefully have grown. It's like that old puzzle, the Ship Theseus, if you've heard of it. And the question is, if you replace every board on that ship one by one, is it still the same ship when you're done? Because we are constantly replacing boards in our personalities and getting bigger, smaller, thinking differently. So what connects the 5-year-old you to the current you? And Locke was like, memory. That's the glue. But for anyone that's played with glue, you know it gets kind of messy. If you forget something that you did, does that mean you didn't do it? If you have a false memory, which happens all the time, by the way, our brains are really like the worst recording devices that you could possibly have. But does that become part of you, that false memory, that thing that may not have actually happened? See, the simple answer isn't cutting it. We got to dive deeper because memory is just part of the overall story. And from what I read, it can't be the whole thing. And we need evidence. We need to see what happens when the machine breaks. So we're about to meet someone who lives entirely in the present moment and what his life actually looks like, what his challenges are. And it really does break your brain on everything that we think we know. And what I'm talking about, or more importantly, who I'm talking about, is Clive Wearing, because Clive was a musician. And in the 1980s, he actually caught a virus that attacked his brain. And specifically, it was the hippocampus. You could think of the hippocampus as the save button for your life story. Now, Clive's save button, it's broken. He lives in a loop of about 30 seconds. He constantly feels like he's just woken up for the very first time. So if the memory theory was right, especially in Clive's case, then Clive himself should be gone. He should be an empty shell. But here's the thing. He's not. Clive, my man, can still play the piano beautifully. He knows how to speak. He knows how to dress himself. These are different kinds of memory. Procedural memory is what I like to call it. It's like muscle memory, and it's stored in a different part of the machinery. And this is the kind of heartbreaking part. He recognizes his wife, Deborah, and he greets her with incredible joy every time she walks in the room, almost as if he's still in love with her, even if she just left for a minute. So You can look at this. We can look at this and say, aha! He lost his memories, but he kept his skills and his emotions because consciousness is deeper than just the life story, right? But wait a minute. Let's be skeptical for a second. Because science isn't about the answer that feels good. When Clive sees his wife and actually lights up, is that the complex, conscious emotion of love? Or is it deeply ingrained, like an automatic response, like a reflex? If you train a dog to get excited when it hears a bell, is the dog conscious of the training? So we can't just look at the cases that support our ideas. I mean, what about things like Alzheimer's disease? In the late stages, it doesn't just take the memories, it often dismantles the personality entirely. So the evidence from amnesia is complicated. It tells us memory isn't everything, but it doesn't exactly tell us exactly what is everything. Because the brain is not a computer. So maybe we need a better model because I often use the computer analogy. Active awareness in my thought process is the RAM, the random access memory, and the subconscious, the skills, the deep programming. That to me has always been the hard drive. Consciousness is the whole package. And to me, it's always been kind of a neat analogy. But I was wrong. So this is a brain. And this is a computer. The brain is not a digital computer. A computer stores files in specific locations. If I want a picture of my cat, I go to this sector of the drive and pull it up. The brain doesn't work like that. A memory isn't a file. It's more like a network. It's a pattern of connections between billions of neurons. Every time you recall a memory, you aren't just reading it, you're rebuilding it. You're rewiring the network. And this is called neuroplasticity. And it ruins the computer analogy. In a computer, the software runs on the hardware. But in the brain, the software changes the hardware. Every experience that you have, every skill you learn, physically alters the structure of your brain. So the distinction between your programming and your data, biology, every experience you have, every skill you learn, physically alters the structure of your brain. So the distinction between your programming and your data is completely blurred. It's all just, biology. It's wet, it's messy, complicated biology. Now let's talk about the core self and the crowbar. The Phineas Gage paradox. Okay, the computer analogy is out, but we still have this sense that there's a core you. Even if we accept the brain is constantly changing, maybe there are innate drives like your temperament, your curiosity, the factory settings. Maybe that's the real you, the stuff you were actually born with. And we call this stuff the dispositional self. People like H.M., who is another famous amnesiac. He lost his memory but kept his gentle personality. So the temperament seems stable, right? But here's where nature throws us another wonderful curveball. Let's flip the script. What happens if you keep your memories but lose your personality? And that's where this guy named Phineas Gage comes in. In 1848, Gage, who is a railroad foreman, he's packing explosives. And then there's an accident. A 3-foot-long iron rod shoots straight through his skull, mostly damaging just the frontal lobes. And the crazy part, the miraculous part, is he actually survives. He can walk, he can talk, and more importantly, he remembers his entire life. His memories are all intact. That is crazy. But his personality is gone. Before the accident, Gage would be kind of described as polite. He was a responsible person, a good leader, but after the accident, they called him impulsive, aggressive. He couldn't hold a job. His friends said that this guy is no longer Gage. So this is a huge problem for our investigation, for the research, right? If you lose your memory but keep your temperament, then we have to say the temperament is the real you. But hold up. If you lose your temperament and keep your memory, then we say he's no longer himself. Man, so which is it? I mean, we can't have it both ways, right? Why do we arbitrarily decide that the temperament is the real you? Why is my innate curiosity more me than the values I learned and the choices I made? It seems the self is not the one thing. It's the whole complicated interactions between all of these different parts. It's the light switch versus the movie screen. Where exactly is consciousness? Now, we've talked about the content of consciousness, the memories, the personality, but what about awareness itself? The feeling of being alive. Where does that happen? Now, if you ask a neuroscientist where consciousness actually lives in the brain, get ready for a little bit of a fight, because there are two main camps. Camp 1 points deep down to the brainstem. This is the ancient primal part of the brain that apparently handles basic life support like breathing and sleep and awake cycles. They argue that this is the power supply, or the light switch, if you will. You need the brainstem to be awake, and being awake is the foundation of consciousness. Well, that makes sense, right? But wait, because Camp 2 says being awake isn't the same as having a rich, detailed conscious experience. They argue that content of consciousness happens in the cortex, which is that wrinkly outer layer, especially in the back, called the posterior hot zone. So they argue that this is more like a movie screen. This is where the information from your eyes and ears and memory is integrated into this seamless experience. So think about when you're dreaming. Your brainstem is keeping you mostly paralyzed, but your cortex is running wild. It's generating all kinds of incredibly vivid consciousness. So the truth is, we don't know yet. It's probably an interaction between the two. You need the power supply to turn on the movie screen, but the major theories today, things like Global Workspace Theory, suggest that the experience we associate with consciousness happens when information is broadcast across the cortex. It's the crosstalk between the different parts of the machine that actually makes us aware. So now let's talk about the hard problem and the grand illusion. We've taken the self apart and we found memories. We found the temperament. We found neuroplasticity. We found debates about brainstems and cortexes. But we still haven't answered the fundamental question. Why does any of it feel like something? Why does the electrochemical firing of neurons feel like the taste of coffee, or the sadness of loss, or even the color red? Because this is what philosophers call the hard problem. How does the physical stuff create the mental stuff? I mean, it feels kind of like magic. Most scientists assume that there must be a physical explanation that we just haven't found yet. And their thoughts are we just need better tools, better theories to bridge that gap between the objective brain and the subjective experience. But there's another perspective, a kind of radical one called illusionism. Because philosophers like Daniel Dennett, he argues that the hard problem isn't a problem at all. These philosophers argue that this rich, magical feeling of subjective experience is all an illusion. Think about that. They suggest that the brain is just a very, very complex information processing machine. It processes input, generates behavior, and then reports on its internal states. And once you've explained all of these functions, the memory, the attention, the self-reporting, there is nothing really left to explain. The feeling is just the brain doing its job. We are so complex that we have fooled ourselves into thinking that there's some extra magical consciousness juice in the machine. Maybe consciousness isn't the thing that experiences the illusion. Maybe consciousness is the illusion. So here it is, the joy of not knowing. Because where does that leave us? If I erased all of your memories, would you still be you? The person with your history, your values, your relationships? No, that person is gone. Would you still be a conscious being? Yes, you would. Would your fundamental drives and temperament remain? Probably, unless we damage the frontal lobes, kind of like what happened to Phineas Gage. Or it dissolves through diseases like Alzheimer's. Because we haven't found the self. It's not a single entity. It's more like a process. It's a dynamic interaction of biology, memory, and experience. It's layered, like a cake. It's constantly being built and rebuilt. And as for consciousness itself, is it a fundamental property of the universe, or is it just a clever trick played by 3 pounds of biological matter? Because in the end, we don't know. And that's the best part. The fact that we, collections of atoms organized in a complex way, can even ask these questions is the most amazing thing of all. So unfortunately, the investigation continues. So keep staying curious.